Hi, my name is Marsha Chesley, and you're watching 10 Questions. I think if you spoke to every casting director, they all have a different route. There's no one way, there's no easy way, there's no school. I was a kid actor, sort of semi-professional, and I was just a kid that wasn't going to quit school to become an actor. And when I was young, that's the only way you could become an actor. There was no school for that either. So I just kept going to school and got a master's in French and taught high school. And still always missed acting and loved acting. So at a certain point, I thought that I would do some community theater, and I auditioned, and there was no network even for that. There was no Theatre Ontario or anything like that. So the only way that you heard about auditions was from networking, going from one audition to another. And when you went, you would sign in, and those sheets would be passed to the next producer who was looking for actors. And they would call everybody on the sheet. I would get those calls, and at the beginning I thought, I must have been brilliant. And I didn't realize that it was just because I was breathing. They just needed bodies to come in and audition. And when I talked to people, they would say, if you got 10 auditions, you would get one callback, you were doing well. And I got called back all the time, but I never got cast. I never, ever was cast. I just kept going to auditions. I was called back, never got cast. And I got one of those phone calls from a producer saying, we're holding auditions next week. And it was for a play that was going to be put on in Northern Ontario. It was Sudbury or North Bay in the middle of winter. And I hung up the phone and I thought, I don't want to go to Sudbury in the middle of winter. And I realized it was a light bulb moment, because I realized it wasn't in my blood. And my entire career since then has proven me right. Actors will do anything. They don't ask where. The bag is packed and they're off. So I knew that acting wasn't in my blood, that passion that you really, really need. So I did hand in my resignation as a teacher, and it would be effective at the end of the year. And I started, it was like a full-time job, looking for a job, something to do with this business. And I thought, because I spoke French, that I could do research and I would apply for all these jobs. And I watched television, CBC, all day, looking for research jobs, any show that listed researchers. And I kept writing letters and applying. And then I heard about a brand new casting department being opened up at CBC, first time ever. And I kept trying to reach the woman who was the administrative head, and I couldn't reach her. They wouldn't let me through. I wrote to her, and I said I was going to call, but they must have thought that I was an actress looking for work. They wouldn't let me through. Her name was Muriel Sharon. She was wonderful. And I was supply teaching, which is one of the lucky things teachers can do. Mm-hmm. And I got a call from one of the schools I was teaching at that he had a full-time position for the winter months. I had spent 6 months doing this, and I just didn't want to take it. It had been hard enough to hand in my resignation the first time. I'm making this too long, but basically what happened was that I hung up the phone knowing that I had to give this man an answer by the end of the week, because school was going to close for Christmas holidays. Mm-hmm. And I literally hung up the phone and my hand was still on it. And it was Muriel Sharon calling me back saying, I got this letter from you, why haven't you called me? And she tried to dissuade me that I would be making so much less money than as a teacher, and they didn't know the exact rules of the game yet. It was brand new. And I said, no, you can't dissuade me. So she said, okay, I'll give you an appointment, come in this Friday. And Friday was the day I had to let the high school principal know. And so I was very excited, but I thought, I'm going to still be teaching, because even if she liked me, she'll say, oh, I'll call you in a month. Or I'll let you know in a month. And I went, and it was a very long interview, not because I was so scintillating, but because she was so busy. She didn't close the door. People kept coming in. She kept answering the phone. But all I know is that at the end of it, she gave me a job. So that was my journey. And I was right at the very bottom of that very first CBC casting department, and she was brilliant. And basically every single one of us that she hired, we're still doing it, or unfortunately have passed away. But everybody that she hired stayed doing it. Getting more important, I would say at the beginning of a career, not, because the big mistake that actors make at the beginning of their career is making a homemade demo reel, which is not what a demo reel is. Homemade demo reels, doing scenes on their own or with friends, or taking scenes from schools or workshops or classes they've taken, that might be useful in getting an agent, and it might be useful in getting into workshops where you need to sort of audition to get in, but it's not what we call demo reel. Demo reel consists only of professional work. And the reason is because as in professional work, you're surrounded by professionals. Every aspect, from the lighting to the camera, to the sound, to the other actors, they're all professionals, which shows that actor in the best possible light. So I would suggest at the beginning of a career, don't use one until you've got even one piece of professional footage, or two pieces, or it doesn't have to be long. And in fact, later on, when actors have a lot of material, the biggest mistake is that each scene in it is too long. It doesn't need to show the beginning and the middle and the end of the scene. It just needs to show that actor to the best possible advantage. And one of the things that happens when a scene is too long is that actors, the casting directors or the people watching, can sometimes think, oh, that other person in the scene, I forgot about him. And you don't want that to happen. I guess today, in this day and age, you can't come to an audition if you haven't memorized. Everybody memorizes all the time. And that doesn't mean that we don't understand if, because of nerves, people lose the lines. That happens, but there's a difference, and we can tell the difference. From when they haven't memorized it and when they lose it because of nerves. So I guess that's probably number one. And I guess the other most important thing is you have to believe that you're the best one for the part, because if you don't believe it, how can you convince all the people on the other side of the table that you're the best one for the part? So I would say those are the two biggest things. Well, just what I said, you have to have belief in yourself. You do. I think that, like so many things, people say this about training for physical endeavors or for writing, you have to do it every day. And if actors are going to sit around and wait for someone to give them a job, that's not enough. And I don't mean that they have to be going out and spending money taking more classes, but they have wonderful resources, which are each other. They can be sort of creating their own workshops, getting together. If everybody were to keep the sides that they get from auditions and do them for each other and pass them around, or any scene study classes they've taken, or just anything, and do them together and share it, or do play readings or something. They can't just sit back and wait for the phone to ring. I think that there's more homework to be done. I do think also that actors should be watching television and seeing movies. There's so much stuff that's made here, and they should be totally aware of it so that they're familiar with the directors, so they're familiar with the shows, so they're familiar with the competition. It's only a help if they're going into audition for something that's a series that's been on the air and they they can know the tone of the show before they prepare. And if they know that the scene they're reading would be played opposite the lead in that series, they know who that is. They know what that sounds like. So I think there's a lot of actors who feel that that isn't important work, but it is important work. A lot more homework. And, theater, obviously, pay what you can. It doesn't all have to cost money. They don't have to go to the big, $120 a ticket traveling Broadway shows. They should just be keeping up with what's going on. I'm always wary of lies. I think people embellish, and that's okay. In other words, embellishment to me would be that you skated as a kid and this role requires playing hockey. You haven't been on skates in 20 years, but you used to skate, and you could go out on the rink and practice up, and so you could say to the question, do you skate? You could say yes. That would be acceptable. But I have to tell you that I have also seen on resumes with the person sitting across from me a show that I cast, and I didn't cast them. So it does make me wonder, how did it get there? If I'm being generous, I sometimes think maybe they were an extra and they are embellishing, but I think that's too much of an embellishment. That's a bit much, because you could get caught. Or things like, they say they can speak Spanish, and then the director sits down and starts blathering away in Spanish to them, and they don't have a clue. So you have to be careful. What I look for, I do look for the kind of experience they have, the amount of training. Whatever training they have, there should always be some mention of it, no matter how many professional credits they have. The training is always good. The less professional credits they have, the bigger the training portion of their resume will look. But, that's the kind of thing.
This episode was shot on location at Casting Central, Toronto's premier casting facility. Casting Central offers a friendly, professional atmosphere with 5 studios, each equipped with sophisticated digital equipment, perfect for self-tapes and casting for commercials, film, TV, and theater. Casting Central is also the home of LD Acting Studio.
That's not even something that logistically can happen very often. It can only happen on Casting Workbook. For example, we have the ability to click on something that says that our breakdowns can go to unrepresented actors. But I can tell you the majority of the work that we do, certainly the union work, would never go to unrepresented actors. So the breakdowns are only going to the agents. So an individual actor wouldn't have that possibility. If it's non-union work, if it's student work where both union and non-union people can be submitted, then yes, they would have that right. Is it okay? Sure, it's okay. It's just, I'm not sure why they would. It's a benefit to be with an agent. So I don't see why they would say, I'm not with an agent if they are. My personal opinion is if there's been too much effort put into the wardrobe, I'm always afraid that the people are putting the role on from the outside in. That's not what we want. We want to see it from the inside out. Hopefully the people watching this audition have some imagination. I don't need to see you in that army uniform. But anything that's done, I really believe, should be done for the benefit of the actor, to make the actor feel more like the character. So, for example, if it's something that is a period piece, 100 years old, women shouldn't come in jeans. They should be wearing a skirt, period. No exceptions, because they'll sit differently, their posture will be different. Anyone, male or female, that should be, or the role requires a uniform, whether it's pilot or military or police, then I think the one thing you can do to help is to wear a shirt that's buttoned up at the neck. We do not do that. And as soon as you button up at the neck, you sit straighter and your posture is better just in general. So that's the kind of thing I would say, not going out to rent a uniform. Well, that's another good question. What's a top agency? I think that very often actors are seduced by the names they see on a roster. So they see the biggest names that they recognize and they think, oh, I should be there. Well, not necessarily true. There's specialists in every business and there's specialists in agents. And there are a number of agents who might specialize in actors right out of school or actors new to the city or new to the game, and they will nurture them and then they'll move on. And so how do you define a good agent? I think that the more important question is how do you get along with that agent? Does that agent answer your calls? Does that agent answer your questions? Does that agent make you feel important or unimportant? Those are more important questions. And do they follow your advice? So, for example, if there are student productions that don't pay and you want to do them, and you want to be submitted, you have to make sure to tell your agent that, but you have to make sure that your agent will follow through. So what is a big agent? It's a very difficult question. More support. We should be cheering on every aspect of this industry. We are all the better for every success, and all the failures hurt just a little. So we should be cheering every endeavor, helping every endeavor, supporting people, going out, seeing the stuff, and just being champions of all parts of the industry. I would have to say the first person was Muriel Sharon, who hired me. I many times asked her after that, why? Why did you hire me? I was a high school teacher. What was there that you saw? And she was a really incredible woman, and she had a real eye. And she said what she was looking for was team players. She didn't want egos. She didn't want divas. She wanted people who would get in there, work hard, get their hands dirty, because it's true. We didn't know. Nobody knew what the job was going to be at that time. And it's so long ago, if you can believe this. Film was just coming to CBC Drama. Most of the shows at that time were still just done on videotape, where you'd go into a big studio and rehearse for 3 weeks and then shoot it with multi-cameras for 4 days. And so film was a brand new thing, and it was a very different thing. Since the whole electronic cameras in studio was much more like theater in a way. So we didn't know what the job was going to be, and the hours were crazy, and the money was absolutely nothing. And we had a ball, and we all felt we were working on things that were important. We all felt the passion. It was really wonderful. And then the second person I would have to say it was Dorothy Gardner. She was one of those first casting directors when Muriel hired me as an assistant. Dorothy Gardner was a really wonderful, soft-spoken person who was totally about the work, no ego, wonderful teacher, a really wonderful woman. And she just taught me a lot, both about the business and personally, and I miss her. Okay, yes, it was great fun to write. It is basically as if you were sitting in my living room having a conversation with me about the casting process specifically for camera. Mm-hmm. It is not anything to do with auditioning for theater, which is a different thing and covered many other places. I believe my book is still the only one out there that is only for on-camera auditions. And it covers from the beginning, before the beginning, till past the end. But it's not a sort of wagging the finger, you must do this or don't do that. It's a conversation. And I spent about a year interviewing a lot of people. Along with all the information, I put myths that a lot of people believe about the casting process that are not true, and said why. But I also collected, I guess I can call them war stories from both sides of the table. Things that actors had to suffer through in auditions that were ridiculous, things they were asked to do or whatever, and situations they found themselves in, and also casting directors and directors and producers from my side of the table. And some of the stories are very, very funny and very poignant, and they just run the gamut. But mainly it is the gospel according to me. I am sure that other casting directors might have different things to say, although the basics would be pretty much the same. And how to prepare, how to conduct yourself in the room, how to leave the room, what to do after the audition, how to sort of cope with rejection. I mean, after all, actors have chosen a business where they face a lot of rejection. I'm constantly canvassing actors, to see what they say is the common ratio these days. How many auditions do you have to go to before you land a role? And working actors, not the superstars and not people just starting out, but people who are working, making a living as actors, the common number seems to be, I'll say 18, because they go from 15 to 20, which means if you're auditioning 18 times and you're only getting the role once, and you're considering that successful, you're failing 17 times out of 18. And so what I always say when I'm teaching courses to actors, when you graduate from your course, when you start out, you think you're calling yourself an actor, and I beg to differ. What you really are when you start out is an auditioner. And that means you have to go to each audition as if that's the job and do the best you can, give it the respect that it's due, which I feel it often isn't given. By that I mean go in time, learn the lines, do the homework, ask yourself the questions that need to be asked, like a scene study class for every audition. Be prepared for the question, what have you been doing lately? Be positive. All the stuff that you have to do to have a successful audition, you have to do it. And then when you finish the audition, consider that the job. And if you feel you've done a good job, you aced it, that's your success. And you have to learn to accept that there are many reasons that actors don't get a job, not all of which mean they did a bad audition. There are many, many reasons. And if they can accept that that audition was the job, they did the very best they could, and they impressed all the people behind the table, then that's their success, and they don't think about it after that.